My name is Devine, and I will be speaking with Hashim Benford, the Leadership Development Coordinator at the Workers Center. Thank you for speaking with us this afternoon, Hashim.
No problem.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the Workers Center and what type of initiatives you are engaged in?
Yeah, really briefly, the Miami Workers Center is a grassroots social justice organization. We do community, primarily focus on community-based organizing and leadership development. And the mission of the organization is to build power in low-income and working-class Black and Latino communities in Miami towards greater democracy, racial, economic, and gender justice in South Florida. That's kind of the vision. And as I said,
so from your perspective, what efforts have you seen Miami-Dade County engage in currently to encourage that kind of economic development and foster that dialogue in the county and in the region?
I think from our experience and in our analysis as an organization, it begins on how you define economic development. And I think in general, the county, and I think this is true of most municipal governments around the country, think about economic development in terms of building buildings, and think about economic development in terms of attracting business or attracting capital, which means that the primary purpose of development is not seen as building an economy that supports people's needs necessarily, but the theory is that if we build buildings that attract large businesses or large capital interests, that will inherently generate an economy that will provide good paying jobs, etc. And I think for the most part, we believe that theory is false. If you look at a lot of the development that has happened in this community over the course of the last 10 or 15 years, investing in development that is principally about bringing in businesses doesn't translate into real economic opportunities or building the capacities of local economies for a couple of reasons. One, because the purpose of business is not to create jobs. The purpose of business is not to make sure people's needs are met. The purpose of business is to make a profit. And so the assumption that people making a profit turns into good jobs, I think is a false assumption, one. And if you also look at the kinds of industries that we have in South Florida, they're not the type of industries that produce good paying jobs. And so if the primary development, for example, that we're doing in Liberty City is development of strip malls, that means you're attracting retail shops that are going to pay mostly minimum wage jobs, have very few benefits, not actually create a lot of opportunity. Deal with the kind of bigger questions about what kind of development are we doing and what kinds of industry are we trying to attract. And I think there's a bigger question of the businesses that do come in, what is the community control or the community say over that process? How are we doing? How is development responding to the needs of the community? And how are they guiding what that development looks like? I think all in all, the county doesn't do a very good job of addressing these kind of key questions. And for the most part, does a really poor job of having really good community oversight and good community buy-in. I think from what I've seen, what we've witnessed, particularly around a specific project that we were pretty heavily invested in since about 2006, is that they kind of come up with their master plan and then they have a town hall and they say, here it is, we want your input. Well, at that point, the plans are already in motion, and whatever input they get, there's no real way to actualize that or hold them accountable to it.
Well, I mean, despite, some of the shortcomings of the county, have there been initiatives that you have maybe heard about that sound promising, or maybe some ideas that are coming from the Miami Workers Center that kind of grassroots beginnings that you would like to see kind of push forward in the upcoming years?
Yeah. So the first question is, have I seen things that are promising? Unfortunately, the answer is no. In terms of what it could look like, I think, there's a precedent for community benefits agreements that is, 10, 15 years old now. In a lot of ways, Miami's behind the curve on it, in which that recognizes that the development process, there's kind of three major players in the development process. There's private interest, private capital, government, and then there's community. And for the most part, development decisions right now are happening between private capital and the government, and our government is kind of taking the position that it represents the interests of the community, which isn't necessarily true. So one thing, what we've lacked here in Miami-Dade is a real concerted effort to say, here are the targets, here are the benchmarks we want to hit, and companies that don't comply, there's got to be some kind of penalty or some kind of clawback. And I think for the most part, we've seen local government take a passive or pretend like they have less power than what they actually do. With a lot of the projects, particularly in low-income communities, a lot of them are receiving some kind of public funding, whether it be local community development block grant money or money directly out of the county budget or some kind of federal funding. And so there's a lot of leverage there because without that piece, the private developers aren't able to go out and get additional financing from banks, et cetera. So there's actually quite a bit of leverage that local government has to hold developers accountable. And they should be holding them accountable to needs that get identified and defined by the community. But that requires a community-led process, and it requires political will on the behalf of government to really figure out a development relationship that tries to even the scales a little bit between private interest and local community. So unfortunately, so that to us, that's what it would look like. At least that would be an initial step. For the most part, we haven't seen a willingness to do that.
Well, I think you've touched very broadly and very in depth to a lot of the topics that we are discussing in class, and I'd like to conclude this interview, and thank you so much. I really appreciate it.